Building a fantasy world and a fantasy world map can be tricky, but it can also be fun. So here are some tips and tricks that I use to create my fantasy world / fantasy map in my book series, the Royal Jelly series. One of the tools that I used in making this physical map was Incarnate, which is a fantasy world building map site. But in order to get to this point, at the beginning of the book, what I did is visualize the world. I did visualize what the world would be like and look like based on the scenes that I already knew that I wanted within the story and kind of the locations that I already knew that I wanted within the story. And from there, as the story went along, I kind of visualized the directions and the ways in which the characters were moving to determine where I was going to place certain buildings, where I was going to place certain roads or mountains, and even other kingdoms. And from there, I would be able to roughly place the places that I wanted on the map and connect them with roads. So you can kind of see as an example of that within Hyvina, which is the fictional world of Royal Jelly. I already knew where I wanted majority of the events to take place, which is inside of the castle. When I read back on my story and how I visualized it, like there's a scene where Zamira is looking out on the balcony and she's looking towards the mountains, and there's a scene where the carriage, there's a secret passageway from the castle into the forest so the royals can avoid any pedestrians that might be traveling by on the street in front of the castle, so they have like a secret passageway. So as I visualized that and kind of visualized the direction that these characters were going and maneuvering, then I was able to place the elements that I wanted to place on the map. So it's like, oh, okay, I have the castle. Now from there, I know that there has to be mountains in the distance behind it. So then I was able to place mountains behind it. And then I knew that there had to be a vast forest to where the secret tunnel that they were using would be located, and that had to lead to the road. So then I was able to place the vast forest and a secret passageway, a rough secret passageway that would lead from the castle through the forest out onto the road. And it was the same thing with the Weeping Wall. The Weeping Wall is this big element within the story. It's a large gray brick wall that is made up of bricks of all of the dwarf queens that have died within the story. And it's supposed to be this place, this very gruesome, ugly place that tells the history of this queendom and all of the young girls that have died and been sacrificed throughout the centuries that have contributed to this gruesome gray brick wall on the horizon that the people of the queendom look to but actually hate. It's kind of an unspoken thing, but it's always present and it's ginormous and it's daunting. So since I knew that there had to be a weeping wall, that's one of the elements that's inside of my story. How I envisioned it in my head was that everyone was always looking north. Like when someone was traveling, it will always be to the north of the character, and they were always able to see it just on the horizon towards the north. So knowing that, I was able to place the Weeping Wall towards the north on my map, and from there I was able to place all of the other places that these characters went to, traveled to, lived at south of that, because I knew that wherever they were within this queendom, as long as they were looking north, they were looking at the Weeping Wall. And of course, this map didn't come about all at once. It did take me some time to build some layers. It took layers to actually build out the map thoroughly. So of course, the first thing that I put down were the important places that I knew were very significant to the story. So the castle where all of the dwarf queens lived, the Weeping Wall, which is a big part of their history, the temple, which I know is also a big part of their history, but also a part of their society and does play a bigger part in the future books of the series. I knew there was a marketplace. Didn't exactly know where I wanted to put it, but once I had my main elements down, then I was able to place that. This is a completely different day, but when I placed something down on the map, even if it was temporary, that also helped me to form the story better. I had no idea where I wanted the marketplace to go, but just putting it down on the map helped me to visualize better if it was realistic to have in that place. for the characters to get there and how they would get there. Another tip is to have a separate list to list out all of the places that your characters actually visit and or mention that would be in your story. So you can have a list of all the places that you need to put down on your map. So once I had all of my solid places that I knew is where all of the action and the living took place for these characters, then I was able to fill it in to make it more of a map of the fantasy world. So that's where I was able to place trees. I was able to place little communities and houses just to fill up the space, even little places of body of water to make this map more believable. And you can see actually through the layering that I'm talking about as you read throughout the entire series, because in book 1 you just see a map of Hyvina, which is like the castle, the temple, the weeping wall. But as you get to book 2, it expands a little bit where you can see the surrounding kingdoms and queendoms that surround Hyvina. And when you get to book 3, it expands even further because there's more dominions that get involved within the book. So I was able to expand the world bit by bit as I continued throughout the story. And I do recommend that you put other elements within your map in your fantasy world, so it doesn't seem like the place that you're talking about is the only place within this world, and it actually feels like the place that you're talking about is just one story within a bigger scope of stories. These are one of the places within an ever expanding world. So that is some of the ways that I built my fantasy world map for my Royal Jelly series. And if you want to see it for yourself, check out my Royal Jelly series, available everywhere, but you can specifically get it on my site, aaliyahzealous.com.
I look like a bag of money I'm on. They wanna know what I'm on. Got diamonds dancing on my neck. That is the vibe I'm on. Drip way too lit. Who gon' check? You can tell me none. Boss mode in effect, and my money